I'm here with Captain Paul Watson. We're going to be talking about the Hitman for the Kindness Club. And Captain Paul Watson was also the founder of Sea Shepherd and various other protective agencies around the world. And I also recently heard a church for the environment. So I am looking forward to having a discussion about this book. I've been reading a little bit of the book, let me rather be specific. I read halfway through, but what's great about this book, Paul, is that I find the book really engaging in that I can read the short stories of your life from your childhood, and each is almost written like a mini adventure, So as I'm reading the story, I can't wait until the end of this story, and then I can't stop with the next story. I need to start the next story to see now what is the next story, and the way you've actually titled them is also quite exciting. It really creates. It really makes me want to read the next one to see what happened next in your life. So it all started, I think, if I read it correctly, with the beavers in Canada when you started that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was raised in an East Coast Canadian fishing village. It was very close to there's a lot of forest and everything around. But when I was 10 years old, I spent the summer almost every day swimming with a family of beavers and in the forest. And had a great time, wonderful time. And the next summer when I went back to that beaver pond, I couldn't find any beavers. The dam was wrecked. I began to ask questions, found out trappers had come in during the winter and they took them all. They didn't leave any, they just took them all. And that made me very angry. So the next, that winter actually, when just as I was turning 11, I began to walk the trap lines and free the animals and destroy the traps. I would actually take them and throw them in the river. And so I did that for a number of years. And the beavers didn't come back to that pond, but I tried everything I could. But I also was rescuing not just beavers, but everything from weasels to seagulls, even kittens sometimes, or cats. And so that was where I really got an affinity for protecting animals.
Yeah, and then that's when you contacted Aida Fleming and about joining the Kindness Club, which
Well,
which is the title of the book, right?
yeah, I didn't actually contact her. My mother had signed me up for
Oh,
to.
yeah, I remember that. Yes.
And Ida's an interesting woman. She was the wife of the conservative premier of New Brunswick, Hugh John Fleming, and she set up this kindness club to teach children to be kind to animals. Albert Schweitzer was actually the honorary president. I remember on this, and so yeah, it was she sent literature out. We would read it and everything. I never met her until I was in my 20s, and I was coming back from leading the Greenpeace campaign to protect harp seals off the East Coast. And Al Johnson and I decided, oh, let's go drop by and see Ida Fleming, and she was quite delighted to see us. And as I left, she said, you've become the hitman for the Kindness Club. So that's where I got the title for the book.
Yeah, that's fantastic, I must say. And reading your book, it is like that, and I also think that its initial encounter with the beavers when you were destroying those traps and things almost is like it's almost like your career where you destroyed machinery and various man-made things to protect wildlife, or use man-made things as well. Yeah.
Well, I devised a strategy in the mid 70s, which I call aggressive nonviolence, which is let's intervene, but let's not hurt anybody. And we've never injured anybody. But I believe that destroying a non-sentient object to protect a sentient life is justifiable, especially if that is being done illegally, to intervene against illegal activities, and which is what we've mainly done. For example, if somebody's about to shoot a rifle at an elephant and you smash the rifle out of their hand and break the rifle, to me that's an act of nonviolence. But we live in a society where property is valued more than life, and so any damage to property is considered more violent. I always put it this way again, what our values are. Imagine walking into Mecca and spitting on the black stone. Well, you're not going to get out of that city alive. You'll be torn to pieces. Or walk into Jerusalem and hack away at the Wailing Wall with a pickaxe, and you're probably going to get an Israeli soldier's bullet in the back for doing it. Nobody's going to have any sympathy for you because you've attacked something which is sacred. Yet each and every day we go into the most sacred and beautiful cathedrals of the natural world, the rainforests of Amazonia, or into China, or the Great Barrier Reef off of Australia, and we totally desecrate and destroy these cathedrals. And how do we respond to that? We don't do anything other than petitions or write a letter to the government, or dress up in animal costumes and jump up and down with protest signs. That's pretty much about it. But if the rainforests of Amazonia, the Great Barrier Reef, is sacred to us as a hunk of marble in Rome, or an old wall in Jerusalem, or a hunk of meteorite in Mecca, we would literally rise up and defend that no matter what the cost.
Yeah.
And we're so connected to this anthropocentric reality or point of view that those are our great values. Anything man-made is valuable. Anything not man-made is considered, exploitable.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy, and I don't know how it's even possible to change that sort of mindset. To expand the way we see living beings, or the way we see other humans, for example. Now, well, if you see what's happening in Israel and so on at the moment, you start wondering if we even care about other humans the way we should be. But how I don't know, how can we expand the general public's perception about animals to include them as other sentient beings, to actually, we'll talk about the vegetarian vegan thing a little bit later, but to include them as actual beings that have rights to life, or and protect them almost like we would protect other humans. So to see what happened in the Second World War, when a population was targeted and abused and killed, and the rest of the world intervened. How do we get people to sort of intervene in what's happening to biodiversity and wildlife around the world?
Well, I'm not really sure we can, because again, we've been so indoctrinated into this collective mass psychosis of anthropocentrism that the other living things are sort of alien to us. We don't even give much thought to them, and we don't understand just how important interdependence and diversity are to our own survival. A few years ago, I got a call from Brett Hume, as a reporter for the Fox News network in the US. And he said, at a recent lecture, did you say that trees, birds, whales, and fish are more important than people? And I said, yeah, I think I did. And he said, how could you say something so outrageous? I said, what do you mean? You said that they're more important than people? I said, yeah. And I'll tell you why. Because they can live here without us. We can't live here without them. We need them. They don't need us. They're far more important than we are. A world without bees, a world without fish, a world without trees is not a world that we're going to live in. A world without humans, well, I think it'll do quite well. But, so again, it's this idea that we're just better and everything is made exactly for us. Anthropocentrism has also led to, well, the wars it's just been never-ending wars all through our history. We don't even have respect for our own species because we've divided ourselves into this group and that group. It's like they're all different football teams and we can beat the hell out of them. We all got these little pieces of cloth that we decide that's what we're going to identify with, and we justify everything that we do. I mean, with Hitler, it was the master race. With Israel, it's the chosen people. I mean, it's all the same thing. And I don't even believe that we get together to say, for instance, to go after the Nazis in World War II. I don't think that was what it was meant. I think it was all about a power grab. I mean, to me, World War II was really the destruction of the British Empire and the replacement of the British Empire with the American Empire. It's all just, using opportunistic moments to seize what somebody else has had. And it'll constantly change again. It's all over territory and ridiculous beliefs. But what I do see as the solution to this is this is why I set up the Church of Biocentrism, is that it's basically around three things. So the three laws of ecology: the law of diversity, that the strength of an ecosystem is dependent upon the diversity within it. The second is the law of interdependence, that all species within an ecosystem are interdependent with each other. And the third is the law of finite resources. There's a limit to growth because there's a limit to carrying capacity. And when one species steals the carrying capacity of all the other species, that causes diminishment in both diversity and interdependence, leading to ecological collapse. So if we do not find a way to live in harmony with other species and to respect those other species, we're simply not going to survive. Hopefully we'll have a minor ecological collapse, which might be a good swift kick in the ass and just, teach us a lesson that we need to know. But to show you how perilous the situation is in 2010, there was an article in Scientific America that stated that since 1950, there's been a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton populations in the sea. And phytoplankton provides up to 70% of the oxygen in the atmosphere that we breathe. If phytoplankton were to disappear from the sea, we die. We do not live on a planet where there's no phytoplankton in the sea. It's as simple as that. The forests of the world, which are also being cut down, only provide 30%. Now, why is phytoplankton being diminished? Because we've diminished the populations of whales and dolphins and seabirds and fishes. And they're pretty much the farmers of the ocean. They supply the fertilizer for the phytoplankton, the nitrogen, the iron, and the magnesium, which is the nutrient base for phytoplankton populations. Basically, animals feed the plants feed the animals, and that's the way it is even on land. About 200 million years ago, flowering plants developed, and people don't like to hear this, but the flowering plants actually own us. I mean, they manipulated us for 200 million years. I mean, all animals, really. So what they do is we're going to create these nice little flowers to attract these animals, and we're going to give them some nectar as a reward. Oh, and for those mammals, let's give them some fruits so they can spread our seeds. So we've become incorporated into the sexual the sexual reproductive system of the plants. And we don't even know that. They're using us. They're not doing it consciously, but they're using us, and we get the rewards for that. And in fact, plants that are most manipulative are the plant, the grains and all things like that, which we've made them so successful because we've cultivated them, made them even stronger. The real problem, though, of course, is that, there's about 500 species of potatoes, 600 species of apples and everything, but we've decided, well, only these 6 are okay, and these 6 are okay. And that's going to create a real problem, because if anything happens, just like the potato farm famine in Ireland, because there's only one species they focused on, the whole thing can collapse because of that. And that really illustrates the need for diversity. We need that diversity. We should have availability of 600 species of apples and 500 species of potatoes instead of that. Already we lost the banana, the Cavendish banana, which we see right now, is in big danger because it could be wiped out. It's only cloned. It doesn't really grow. You have to clone it. But the banana that went extinct in the 50s, commercially extinct, was wiped out by plague, and it was replaced by the Cavendish. But it was because we were focusing on that one species, and when the disease hit it, bang, it's gone. And so this is going to be a major problem, I think, coming into the future. And the other thing too, diminishment, I think, leads to zoonotic transmission of viruses. This is why every year on factory farms, they kill literally millions of chickens and pigs, and just bury them alive and gas them and everything. They're trying to keep the lid on those petri dishes, which are factory farms, to keep those viruses from spreading. And like, for instance, the domestic salmon farms, there's a dynamic transmission of viruses from the salmon farms to wild indigenous salmon populations, like in British Columbia, for instance, which is diminishing in those wild salmon because they don't have the antibiotics and the chemicals protecting them like that. And what happens when you reduce or diminish an ecosystem and you remove certain species, the viruses, because there's viruses associated with every single animal and every single plant, the viruses associated with those species have to go somewhere. They need a place to go. And again, it's not a conscious thing. We don't really understand how this is, but they're going to jump. They need to jump to another species. And God, there's nothing more attractive than 8 billion primates that are walking around doing stupid things. So we've been, the common cold we got from the horses, we got, chicken pox, and all these things all came from animals. And now we're going to see more and more of that. When I read Laurie Garrett's The Coming Plague in 1995, she predicted all of this stuff, West Nile virus, hantavirus, Ebola, and the COVID virus. All this stuff is predicted, and it's going to even be worse. And on top of that, you have the release of all of these bacteriums and viruses and various worms and things from the melting permafrost stuff in the Arctic. Who knows? They've already revived some worms and things that have been there for 40,000 years. And in 2017, an anthrax virus came out of the permafrost, killed 1,000 reindeer and 1 human being. So this is going to be more and more of a problem into the future.
Wow. Yeah, no, and I don't know how we are going to change the way, because the human population, well, scientifically or theoretically, the UN says we've reached peak child. So our population should, in a couple of years, I think it's 2050, should start declining. But globally, we're still growing, but ultimately we still need, there's also upliftment happening, people all over the world, in third world countries and developing countries, want the American lifestyle with the 2 cars in the driveway and the living in a suburb, and the food choices that lifestyle affords you. So ultimately there's still going to be a little bit of pain with farming and with global farming expansion and so on. I think I want to let's go to the book before we touch on vegetarianism and veganism, because I'd like to really bring out some of the adventures that you had in your life, and the one specific one was the seals that stood out for me, and the Bridget Bardot, because she was quite instrumental in starting your whole campaign and everything. And I think I just spoke to a French lady friend of mine, and she still remembers Bridget Bardot. Bridget Bardot, she's still active, right? So and she still remembered all of those, the white seals, fur coats, and she's not involved in this type of thing, but she could still remember all of that happening. And so that was massive in the public, right?
Yeah, well, I'm still in touch with her, but she did teach me a very valuable lesson. When we brought her out to the ice floes off of Labrador, and she was very, very courageous. I mean, didn't bother her to fly through the storms with a helicopter or anything. But by putting her cheek to cheek with a baby seal, gave us the front cover of every major magazine in the world, Bunte Stern, Perry Match, whatever. And because again, that brings us to the culture that we live. We live in a media culture, and reality is dictated to us by the media, and it defines what our values are. And the media only understands 4 elements. Any news story has to have 1 or more of these elements, and those 4 elements are sex, scandal, violence, and celebrity. And if you have all 4, you got a super story. So I learned how to manipulate that and get a lot of celebrities on board to do things that are dramatic. I mean, saying, oh, the Japanese are killing whales in the Southern Ocean. Oh, big deal. We're going to go down there and risk our life to protect them, and we're going to get in the way, and they're going to be in a big confrontation with them. Now we got a news story. Now people pay attention to it. Even in Japan, we got headlines in Japan because of that. So again, I think the most perfect story I ever did was in 1984. I led a campaign to protect wolves in British Columbia and in northern in the Yukon, and perfect story. They had the violence of them shooting wolves, the violence of them threatening us if we intervened. We had an environment minister who we caught taking a bribe from a big game hunting organization. Violence and scandal almost there. I recruited Bo Derek as our spokesperson for this, and at the press conference, which was packed, reporter for the Vancouver Sun said, "Oh, come on, what does Bo Derek know about wolves? It's ridiculous having her as your spokesperson." And I said, well, if I had Dr. David Meck or Dr. Gordon Haber here, the 2 foremost wolf biologists in the world, I think it'd be an empty room. But I see the thing is packed, got all the TV cameras here. It's going to be the front page story of your newspaper tomorrow. You're going to write it. Your editor's going to give it a headline. And you know what? there's nothing you can do about it, is there? And that's exactly where.
Uh, yeah, no, it is. It is great for you to actually having caught on to that quite early, and in your career. And I think, well, and then you were, I think, you were saved by two whales, right? You were saved twice. You risked your life multiple times, but the one was when you got stuck on these ice floats and trying to, in the middle of the night, escape from the ship, and you were like hiding under. You were hiding under bed sheets on the ice so you're not detected by the police, and then the ice float started breaking off, and then you were ended up almost falling in the ocean, and all four of you almost dying there in the ocean the one night. But that's not the one where the whales saved you. But I just wanted to sort of give the guys watching just some idea of some of the adventure stories. But you were saved twice by whales, in fact.
Yeah, well, in 1975, there was an incident which actually just changed the entire course of my life. And we'd come up with this idea to protect whales by reading a lot of Gandhi at the time, thought that, all we had to do was to get between the harpoons and the ship, and they'd stop whaling. And so we went after the Soviet whaling fleet, which at that time was operating only 60 miles off the coast of California. This is before the 200-mile limit. And so we encountered the Soviet whaling fleet. And Bob Hunter and I got into a small boat, got in front of a Soviet harpoon boat that was chasing some sperm whales. And yeah, this was a great tactic. It worked for 20 minutes. I mean, I look back, and the harpooner was clearly frustrated because he couldn't get a shot, until the captain came running down the catwalk and screamed into the ear of the harpooner very angrily, and then turned, looked down at us and smiled and brought his finger across his throat. And that's when I realized Gandhi wasn't going to work that day. And a few moments later, there's a horrendous explosion. The harpoon flew over our head and hit into the backside of a female in the pod that was in front of us. And she rolled over on her side, blood everywhere. She actually screamed. I wasn't even aware whales could scream. And she screamed, and the largest whale suddenly rose up out of the water, slapped the water with his tail, dove, swam right underneath of us, and threw himself at the bow of the Soviet vessel at the harpooner, who was ready because they knew he would do this. They were ready with an unattached harpoon. He pulled the trigger, hit the whale point blank in the head with an explosive harpoon, and the head fell back. The whale fell back into the water, screaming and rolling in agony on the surface. And as he did, I caught his eye, and he stopped. I saw him submerge again. There's a trail of bloody bubbles coming straight towards us, and he came up and out of the water at the angle that they come forward, just came right down on top of us. And as his head rose up out of the water, so close, I mean, I could see my own reflection in the eye of that whale. And as his head rose up out of the water, I felt that whale understood exactly what we were doing, because I could see the effort he made to pull himself back. And instead of crashing down on us, he began to slide back into the sea, and I saw his eye disappear beneath the surface, and he died. He could have taken our lives and chose not to do so. But I also felt something else, and it made me think, why were it was a pity for us, not for them. Why were we killing these whales? They didn't eat them. They were killing sperm whales for sperm oil and spermaceti oil, which is highly prized for lubricating high heat resistant machinery. And one of the things it was most valued for by both the Soviets and the US, except the US had a stockpile, was for the manufacture and maintenance of intercontinental ballistic missiles. And I said to myself, here we are, destroying this incredibly beautiful, socially complex, self-aware, sentient creature for the purpose of making a weapon meant for the mass extermination of human beings. And that's when it struck me. We're crazy. We're insane. And I said at that moment, I don't do this for people. I do this for them, not for us. So, 10 years later, after we sank half of Iceland's whaling fleet in Reykjavik Harbor, and I went to the International Whaling Commission, and a former colleague from Greenpeace came up and he said, what you did in Iceland was reprehensible, criminal, and unforgivable. I said, yeah, so? And he said, well, aren't you concerned about what people think about what you did? I said, no, not at all. We didn't do it for you. Did it for the whales. Find me a whale that disagreed with it. I promise we won't do it again.
Oh, wow. And
make a lot of people very angry because, like I said, if you're going to be an activist, you're going to be an effective conservationist, you have to say things people don't want to hear and do things people don't want to see being done. You have to rock the boat and piss people off.
Yeah. And I think there's almost those two sides, there's almost the marketing side where you need to attract people to the cause and to
Mhm.
to get people to be interested. And then there's the other side where when we are in a crisis and there needs to be the people who communicate this crisis and let people see, because we spoke a little bit earlier about the forest destruction that's happening around the world, and the latest forest reports just out again, talking about how if we don't do something, then by 2050 they believe the Amazon forest will actually start destroying itself, because firstly the overall the heat is too high, the forest is not built for the plants aren't built for living in that heat with the global warming. And then you've also, with the droughts and the fires, it's been too dry, there hasn't been enough rain, and then there's also the chopping out of the forest, and then there's also the other forests around, and we spoke about it earlier. While we're focusing on trying to save these massive forests, other countries are chopping out their little forests, and when they're not getting caught, they blame the developing countries, or they blame the countries over there. Don't look in our backyard, what we're doing, and all the houses and new suburbs we are building, and don't look at our backyard, look at those guys over there. The Amazon forest is the problem.
Yeah.
So how, I mean, this is all happening. We keep getting the reports every year, 60% decline in the weight of wildlife all over the world. We keep getting the forest destruction report, how many percent and how many football fields are getting chopped down every year. We keep getting all of this. But what is that answer? You can only fight so many battles, and then your legal issues start spiling up as well in the different countries, so you fight that battle in your own country, and then you move on and you got legal battles there in that country, and yeah.
The problem is we don't want to change. I mean, everybody wants to change, but they don't want to change. I remember years ago in Toronto, there was talk of cleaning up the Don River and that flows through Toronto. And I was at this meeting where they were talking about it, and the pollution was horrendous. And I said, okay, do we know where the pollution's coming from? Well, yes, it's this factory, this mine, it's that. And so I said, well, shut it down. And they all looked at me like, what? Shut it down. If you don't want a polluted river, shut down the stuff that's pouring the pollutants into the river. Oh, well, the unions are all upset about it, the government's upset. Oh, corporate, we can't do that. I said, then you don't really want a solution, do you? You just want it to continue, and you want it to magically go away, and it is not magically going away. The Amazon will be turned into a desert because all you need to do is cut a swath of clear cutting and stop that atmospheric river from flowing across, which keeps it what it is, and everything you stop the atmospheric river, everything just goes. Just look at the history of North Africa. North Africa was once head forest. North Africa was a very, very biodiverse area. And of course, now the North African elephants extinct, the North African lions extinct, the North African bears extinct. All of these species went extinct, and the diversity collapsed on that. And the Sahara moves 10 miles south every year, getting close, moving towards the equator more and more. That was to me, that was all a man-made creation, that desert. And we started, but we forget about that. We forget that Lebanon, the giant cedars of Lebanon, we forget that the Mesopotamian area was incredibly fertile and diverse. And then we've turned it into God's monkey house now. But we destroy that because we have this incredible ability as humans to adapt to diminishment. Now, this served us really well 20,000 years ago when we had to adapt to diminishment. But what it does now is allow us to just get on with it. For instance, we wipe out the northern cod. Oh, well, let's go after some other fish. Oh, forget about the northern cod. Now we're going to fish this. Now we're going to fish that. The fish become smaller and smaller and smaller. 1965, if I had said to anybody, you know, in 40 years, you could be buying water in plastic bottles and you're going to be paid more for that water than the equivalent amount of gasoline, everybody would have looked at you like you're nuts. Nobody's going to do that. And yet here we are. I mean,
Wow.
we buy water in New York City in plastic bottles, and New York City has the cleanest drinking water in the country because of the water from the Catskills that comes through stone tunnels into the city. I mean, it's absolutely clean water. It's so clean that they bottle it in plastic bottles and take it to LA and sell it as New York City tap water, and people buy it. You know, you can market
Wow.
you can market anything on that. So, I mean, I drink water in Paris out of the tap. I have no problem with it. It's perfectly okay. But, you know, nobody wants to do that because, well, we've been conditioned that it's bad. And it's interesting that the water companies are owned by Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola and Nestle's. I mean, Coca-Cola makes more money selling water than they do selling Coca-Cola. You know?
Yeah.
So, and it's this adaptation to diminishment, constantly. In the 90s, orange roughy was a fish you saw everywhere in the supermarkets. You don't see it anymore because here's a fish that takes 45 years to become sexually mature, lives to be 200 years of age. It couldn't keep up with our demand, unlike a salmon, which takes only 4 years to mature and then dies. So we treat every fish as a fish when in fact they're all different species and they all have different lifestyles and everything. Lobsters can live to 200 years of age, but they seldom get it beyond 7 or 8 years today. And again, it's adaptation. When I was a kid, lobsters were cheap. Um, you could tell the poor kids in our town, we went to school with the lobster sandwiches and homemade bread, you know, and we tried to trade it for bologna or peanut butter on Wonder Bread. We thought that was exotic. Lobsters used to be called the poor man's meat, and it was actually illegal to serve it to prisoners in prisons because it was considered mean, you know, demeanor. In fact, in Prince Edward Island, they used to catch lobsters for the sole purpose of fertilizing the potato crops. Scarcity translates into profit. So what we have now today is what I call the economics of extinction. As we drive species into diminishment, their value goes up, and therefore the exploitation increases on that. Right now, we've pretty much removed 90% of the fishes from the ocean. But people don't believe that because if you go just like next door, there's a fish market. I go there right now, full. Everything you can imagine is there.
Yeah.
Very expensive. But people say, well, obviously there's fish. Forget it. I said, yeah, but it's costing more and more money to catch those fish. Now we have $100 million super trawlers. We have 100-mile long lines, 100-mile long gill nets, purse seine nets, incredible amounts of technological material to get less and less of what was once very plentiful. We have satellites telling us where the fish are. We just came back from the English Channel where there were 6 giant super tankers or super trawlers taking everything they could. Every net that we filmed was the size of 3 school buses being pulled in. And what is in those nets? Blue whiting and herring, which is then rendered into fish meal to go to factory farms and to turn into fish pellets for domestic salmon. And these are the food fishes of everything else. You know, we got to leave these little fishes alone, but no, they're going after everything right now. And fish meal is 40% of all the fish that's taken out of the ocean is rendered into fish meal for factory farms and for salmon farms. And now we're going after the krill in the Southern Ocean to turn that into a protein paste to feed to domesticated animals. And so what we're doing is we're replacing the wild animals with these domesticated animals. And I mean, and what are we doing? We're massacring, or we're killing, slaughtering 90 billion animals every year. 90 billion. I mean, the numbers are mind-boggling. And it's the single greatest contributor to dead zones in the ocean, the single greatest contributor to groundwater pollution, the single greatest contributor to greenhouse gas production. And yet we just carry on and carry on because we do not want to see a solution. I wrote an article last year about, the Burning Man thing that they have every year.
Yeah. Friends of mine are very keen on that. They go every year. I've got big enthusiast friends.
Well, what struck me is that this last year Burning Man, a bunch of people from the oil, Extinction Rebellion and everything went there, and they put up a barricade to block people from going in there about climate change. oh, these people that got in the line, they got violent with them. They were, called, and they ordering their arrest these people. They were beating on them. They were destroying their equipment and everything because they were blocking their way into Burning Man. And what happened 3 days later? Bang, the whole place gets flooded out. Never happened there. It happened before. So they become the victims of climate change. Here, the most Burning Man thing, if you go back to its original origins, the most Burning Man thing that happened last year was that damn blockade on that road. Which all these people, they're coming there, and they're actually coming now in their private jets and their air-conditioned RVs and everything like that.
Goodness.
Now, this is what it's evolved into. When it began, yeah, that was one thing, but that's not what it is anymore. And
the one my friends go to is Africa Burn. So I think that's still a little bit wild. I don't think people really go there in the airplanes and stuff. But
well, it has a few years up with the other one, I guess.
Probably.
But that's what it is. We turn these things into. It's the same with environmental groups. They start with the best intentions, and then they get taken over by opportunists who now look, oh, this is a way to make money. I call it greenwash, or feel good. Let's join Greenpeace to feel good, because we're part of the solution. We're not part of the problem and everything.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
I just find I'm not very popular with environmental conservation groups because of what I say. I was a national director for the Sierra Club in the United States from 2003, 2006, and they were trying to get rid of me because I kept asking questions that they did not want to answer. And but it's always.
But I mean, these are difficult questions. I mean, I've been spending the last 2 weeks in Kuala Lumpur and Malaysia, and I'm semi-vegetarian, so I eat. I call it semi-vegetarian. Some of my friends hate it when I say that. They say there's no such thing as semi-vegetarian. If you eat meat, then you're not vegetarian. I say, well, I eat one meat meal a week. So that's that's sort of my process. I have one meat meal a week, and that's my contribution. But then trying to eat vegetarian. So how I say to these friends, so what do I call how I eat? Because when I go to a restaurant, I need to find a vegetarian meal. So I need to find a vegetarian restaurant for my vegetarian meals. And in Kuala Lumpur, you can't find them. You have to go to specific vegetarian restaurants. The other restaurants don't serve any meals without meat. Every single meal has meat in it. Now, these are thousands of little restaurants. You can go in the streets and you go from restaurant to restaurant. Have you got vegetarian meals? No. Have you got vegetarian meals? No. And then we spoke a little bit earlier about the abuse of animals for some of these slaughters and so on. But what is the answer? Because we're not going to turn an entire country, like, for example, Malaysia, into vegetarians.
Well, we will when you have an ecological collapse or
correct.
more viral infections and things like that. It will happen that way. But things, consider 1980, nobody even knew what a vegan was, and you certainly couldn't find anything. In France, you definitely couldn't find anything. I remember, about 6 years ago, I was down in southern France, and I said on the restaurant down there, one of those outdoor cafes, I said, "Oh, you got a veggie burger here?" And he says, "Yes, we had to get something. I got tired of all these people just eating French fries. That's all they would order." So in order, that was consumer pressure. They had to provide something because they were losing customers on that. So now in Paris, I mean, it's very, very easy to find a vegan restaurant, and they're really quite good. My ships have been vegetarian since 1979 when I started, but in 2000 I made them vegan ships. And you don't have to be vegan to join the crew, but you have to be vegan while you're on the crew, and because that's just what it is. And nobody's ever complained about it. In fact, people leave the ships probably healthier than when they came on. So we try to set by example, and also it gets around people calling us hypocrites. Why, you want to save the fish, but you're eating them, that kind of thing. But and also, the other advantage of having a ship that's vegan is that when you pull into a port in Australia and New Zealand, places like that, you don't have to worry about the coming on board, the quarantines and everything like that. You pull into New Zealand, they'll seize every piece of meat you got and destroy it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's and we spoke a little bit earlier about like some of these like meat cultures that are linked to cultures and to religions, and we specifically spoke about the ships
Mhm.
transporting the sheep or the lambs from various country. I think you were specifically at that point, it was Australia, I think, to the
From
Muslim countries alive. And we recently had in South Africa last week, the Al Kuwaiti caused a big stir in our country, in South Africa, where Al Kuwaiti, a ship, actually came into harbor in Cape Town. It wasn't supposed to be going via Cape Town, but they were redirected via the channel to go around the Cape. They had 19,000 cattle who were starving because they couldn't feed them. So they had to actually dock in Cape Town to come and collect food for all this 19,000 cattle. And then it stank up the whole city. And people were wondering, what is stinking like this? Nobody really understood what is the stench in the city. And then they realized this ship is stinking so badly from all the feces from these cattle. And people were wondering, but what are the cattle's condition on the ship if it stinks like this in the city? So the SPCA went onto the ship and realized the cattle is living in squalor. And the photos, you can have a look on the internet. It is crazy. It is actual cattle just absolutely covered in feces from head to toe, lying in the feces. And they actually had to euthanize some of the cattle. But you saw all of this happening, and in your book, you write actually quite. You're saying like the Muslim religion, where these cattle were also on their way to Iraq, where they require the cattle to be live slaughtered for halal reasons. You mentioned in your book that in the halal religion, originally it was for to be kind to the animals, actually not to have animal abuse by actually slaughtering them live, and you're able to see them being slaughtered. So what is your feeling about that at the moment?
Well, halal laws and kosher laws were developed to find a more humane way of killing these animals. Although, by the way, the Quran actually says you shouldn't eat animals at all, and I think there's a part of the Bible that actually says that too. But it was the way, the spirit of the law. The original intent was to be humane, but then that got replaced. That became the rule of the law. So let's forget about the spirit. We're now just the rule. This is what the Quran says. This is what the Bible says, and this is the way we're going to do it, even if there's a better way to do it. And so, yeah, I did see sheep being offloaded from Australia into Bandar Shapur, which is now Bandar Khomeini in Iran, and they just herded off the sheep. Some of them had lost their eyes because of the ram's horns that got into the eyes of the others. And they were breaking their legs because it was a horrible dock and it was full of holes, and they just left the dead bodies there and moved on. But every one of these cattle and sheep ships, they throw dozens and dozens of bodies overboard every single day on that passage. The death rate on that is a very high percentage, just to deliver that. And in this day and age, if they're going to eat the sheep, or they're going to eat the cows, at least they can just slaughter them humanely and freeze them. It's still getting the same thing, but
Yeah.
that's, again, that's the rule of the law. The rule says you have to ritually cut their throats and do it that way. But
Yeah.
again, if you read the Quran, I have read the Quran, I have read the Bible, and it specifically says that you should not eat meat. But
Yeah.
again, every single religion is great on rules, but not very good on people who adhere to those rules.
Well, you've spent your career fighting these or having to deal with these laws and these rules, and what I read in your book is very interesting in the way you actually know the laws, and you try and work within them to fight the system. But some of these laws are just so crazy and outrageous in some of these countries. Um, but you try and work with the governments, which is what I see in the book. Yeah.
almost impossible to do, though, because whatever you agree with one government, 4 years later is a new government, and it all reverses it. But in 2010, I was invited by the FBI to give a talk at the FBI headquarters in Quantico. They actually paid me to come give a talk, and at the end of the talk, one of the FBI agents says, "Well, Sea Shepherd walks a very fine line when it comes to the law." And I said, "Well, does it really matter how fine the law is as long as you don't actually cross the line?" And I've never been convicted of a felony in my life. So you have to have a good understanding of the law, but the law is a very complex thing because local law, provincial or state law, national law, international law, bilateral treaties, all of these things is so damn complicated. And you also have to deal with, in Canada, we have to deal with the fact that they make up laws specifically to stop you. For instance, when we were protecting seals in the east coast of Canada, Canada overnight passed an order in council law called the Seal Protection Act. Under the Seal Protection Act, then and now, you cannot, if you observe a seal being killed, you've just broken the law. If you film or photograph a seal being killed, you've just broken the law. If you disrupt somebody killing a seal, you've just broken the law under the Seal Protection Act. If you approach within a half a nautical mile of a seal being killed, you've just broken the law under the Seal Protection Act. Nobody has ever been, the only people ever arrested under the Seal Protection Act have been animal rights people, conservationists, scientists, or journalists and filmmakers. So the law. Crazy. Laws are designed to protect the status quo. In the United States right now, we have called the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. Under the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, if you are caught on a farm with a camera taking pictures, you can be charged under that act. It's terrorism. If you're caught in a slaughterhouse taking pictures, you can be charged with terrorism. So if you cost any company more than $10,000 in losses by boycotting their product, you can be charged under the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. In fact, even Oprah Winfrey was actually charged many years ago, actually. She was charged under that because she said on television, "Don't eat hamburgers." And they actually took her to court. She won the case, but it took her, it cost a lot of money to win that case on that. So, to say and if your average person says on television, "Don't eat hamburgers, they're bad for you," you've just defamed the meat industry and you can be charged under the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act.
Oh, wow.
So laws are created all the time to stop things that people disagree with. I mean, in Germany, a couple months ago, they arrested a man before he left his house for a protest that he was intending to attend because the intention to attend this protest, the protest was illegal. It was a climate change protest. That meant that he had broken the law before he had broken the law. And so we're going to have more and more of this coming because as situations become more and more desperate, things are going to become more and more restrictive. Yeah. I've been very fortunate in that I was born in 1950. So my generation has experienced the most materially wealthy time in human history. It'll never come again. And also we experience the freest time in human history. It'll never come again. The things that we did, protesting 60s, 70s, 80s, I can't do today. 1983, I blockaded St. John's Harbor, Newfoundland for 2 weeks. I prevented the sealing fleet from leaving for 2 weeks. And
I was actually just on that part, yeah.
If I did that today, they'd blow me out of the water, and they'd feel justified to do it. Now everybody who is now is just labeled a terrorist. No environmentalist, conservationist, and animal rights person has ever killed anybody in the entire history of these movements. Nobody has ever killed anybody. But over 2,000 environmentalists have been murdered in the last 15 years, and you don't even hear about it, mainly in places like Brazil or Colombia or places in Africa and everything. And unless there's somebody notable like Chico Mendes or somebody, you don't hear about it at all. And that's not considered news. I used to say that if we were to injure or break the finger of a logger in Oregon, that would be the front page news of the New York Times. But if they kill environmentalists, which has happened in the U.S., loggers have done that. It's not even a news story. And then they're always try to, it's jobs, jobs, jobs are all important. You know, this, because of the spotted owl, an endangered species, 50,000 loggers are going to lose their jobs. And how can you justify that? I said, well, during the last 10 years, 200,000 jobs were lost because McDonnell Douglas, IBM, and AT&T decided that it was in the interest of the shareholders that we lose those jobs. So there, that's okay. If you
Yeah.
if you lose your job at McDonald's, nobody gives a shit. You know,
Yeah.
they don't care about your jobs if it's going to affect the bottom line of their profits in the corporation. That's the only thing that ever they're concerned of. It's the same with human rights. I always say human rights are all right as long as the price is right. As long as somebody's making money off of it, then it's fine. I mean, and when people say, you know, that's not war, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. No, it's good for the economy. That's what all these profits are dependent upon that. I mean, just look right now because of Gaza and the Ukraine. Just look at the shares of all of these armament companies just shooting right through the roof and everything. It's good business, and that's the kind of business that we that so many governments are backing up. I mean, when I see the reports right now, oh, Spain and France are going to stop their arms shipments to Israel. I'm going, what the hell were they sending them there in the first place for? Why are we shipping all these arms? Why is Sweden one of the major exporters of weapons and landmines? Sweden's one of the major exporters of landmines, you know, and but you don't hear about that. But so much money being made from it in every country, the United Kingdom, France, all of these countries, even Israel, which seems to be very strange. You're getting all this stuff in, but you're manufacturing weapons and selling it to African countries. You know, it just doesn't make any sense at all, except that it's such big business. You know, you build a tractor, sell the tractor for $150,000. That tractor is probably good for service for what? Even up to 15 years. You know, you can use this tractor, you can repair it, you can fix it. But only $150,000. Let's build a tank. Build a tank for like $25-30 million, one tank. And boy, we'll get rid of that in a year. We'll get it blown up. We got to build up another tank. I mean, it's good for the economy.
Yeah. And when we created this concept of that it's a human creation, a business or a corporation, it's not even a human, it's a creation we created, which is now ending up ruling us, you know. So we've created all these structures in our society, and they now ultimately rule us. Listen, I can carry on talking to you for 2 days like this. This is my food. I love discussing this stuff, but I guess we need to get to the end because I'm not sure how many people will want to watch us talking for 2 days. So ultimately, we're here for the Hitman, for the Kindness Club, and this book of yours, I think, is a testament of your life. To me, it's a life that's inspiring. It's a life that I know you've been having to deal with legal issues and country issues and this and that, and but ultimately, I think what will be said about Captain Paul Watson will be all of those brave, adventurous stories, and guys, you're going to really enjoy those. And thanks a lot for sharing those with us.
Well, thank you.